This week, these next 2 weeks, we actually thought we would do something a little bit different since we're leading up to Holy Week. We thought we would look at what happened during Holy Week in the life of Christ. You know, that very week receives so much attention from Scripture. If you look at the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, what you'll find is that about 8% of the Gospels deals with Jesus' birth and his preparation for ministry, about 30 years of his life. 8%. 59% deals with his actual ministry, which extended about maybe 3.5 years. And 33% dealt with the last 7 days of his life because they were so important. Now, it starts with what we call the triumphal entry. It's when Jesus came into Jerusalem and was received by crowds waving palms. So this Sunday we call Palm Sunday. And Dave's going to tell us a little bit more about what actually happened during Palm Sunday. But Monday through Saturday, the rest of these 2 weeks, we're going to look at different things that happened during Holy Week. So right on the tail of Jesus coming into Jerusalem, we read these words. I'm reading from the book of Mark, chapter 11, verse 11. Jesus entered Jerusalem and he went to the temple. He looked around at everything, but since it was already late, he went to Bethany with the 12. So the triumphal entry took basically all day. Jesus made his way to the temple. That was why he went to Jerusalem that Sunday. And he looked around and saw something that apparently disturbed him. Mark says it was too late that day to do anything about it, so he went back to Bethany, where he was probably staying with Lazarus, Mary, and Martha. The next day, on reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple area and he began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. He wouldn't allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. And as he taught them, he said, "Isn't it written, my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you've made it a den of robbers." Jesus goes to the temple and he drives out the animals, the money changers, and merchants. Hundreds of thousands flocked to Jerusalem during Holy Week, which was also Passover week. They would arrive in the temple and they would buy lambs that were prepared for them there. They would sacrifice the lambs, have a Passover meal with their family, and then they would return home. Whether that was in Jerusalem, whether that was in another city in Judea or Galilee, or whether that was in a city in the dispersion. Um, that was a necessary thing that took place, but Jesus drove the animals and the money changers out. Why? It was because the only place that they could have kept the animals and the money changers was a place called the Court of the Gentiles. The Court of the Gentiles was open to Gentiles who wanted to go to the temple to worship God. They couldn't get into the temple because they weren't Jewish, but they could at least get to the Court of the Gentiles, see the temple, hear the singing, and worship God. But that week, animals and money changers occupied that space. So Jesus drove them out because he wanted to make room for the Gentiles. Do you know what that means? That means that Holy Week is for you. It's for me. I'm a Gentile. I'm not Jewish. And Jesus drove out the things that were keeping me from being there during Holy Week. This week, as we approach Holy Week, Jesus is there for you. He is clearing out space in your life so that you too can hear him, can see him, can understand what he is doing. We'll continue to talk about what Jesus is doing